Have you ever been on a dating app? I think the same dynamic applies. You know, if it's not going to work, just you save yourself an evening, Christ, and move on.
What is Robin going on about? Well, keep listening to find out. This is Matthew Grant, back with the highlights from the first half of our reverse pitch that we held in London recently. Now, we've had literally hundreds of companies on stage telling us what they are doing in technology, data, and analytics. So sometimes it's useful to stop and ask the insurers or other organizations outside of insurance what it is they want from the people providing all of this technology. In this episode, Robin Merttens is on stage in the first half of our event, talking to Jamie Garratt from Talbot, Madeleine Durand from Bupa, Jason Smith from Experian, and our very own Paolo Cuomo in his new role as Head of Strategy at Brit. The whole evening was sponsored by our good friends at PKF Littlejohn, chartered accountants, experts in tax finance, with a special interest in early stage companies and as well as established insurers. Lots of useful advice in here and some explicit requests for help from all of our guests. Now look out for part 2 coming soon when I'm on stage talking to Allianz, Renaissance Re and Hiscox. And if you like what you hear in the podcast, you may also want to take a look at the summary report of the event that we are now putting up on the website. Great for a reminder of what was on at the event and also for sharing amongst your colleagues. There's a link to this in the episode notes. You'll also find a link to your free copy of Insurance Insider. If you haven't already discovered the Insider, take a look and see why we and so many others are enthusiastic readers of their daily news about what is happening in insurance in the wholesale, specialty and reinsurance markets. Now, on with the show.
So next up is Jamie Garratt. He goes by the grand title of Head of Digital Underwriting Strategy, and he works for Lloyd's Syndicate. So there was a time in my life I never thought I'd hear those words in the same sentence. That's a very grand title, and it suggests that your employers are trying to do things digital. What's the role, and what does it entail?
There's a handful of people who operate in my space in Lloyd's, a few of whom are here tonight. In terms of what the grand title actually means, for me it's looking at how technology can enhance and expand our underwriting offering. Enhance is basically how can we make our underwriting more profitable, how can we offer better products, how can we generally deploy technology to assist our underwriters, our brokers and our clients. And then in terms of expand, it's looking at distribution. It's saying how can we use technology to enhance the reach of our underwriting. So
you've been in that role for 18 months. Are you supported, and what have you been able to achieve, do you think?
I began my career in underwriting, and I was one of a group of people internally who kind of went and said to the executive, we think the market's changing and we don't necessarily see the evidence of how the company is changing to match that. And they said, we get that, we want to put people into a role and a team around this. And so there was that initial support. We definitely fight a battle every day in terms of trying to convince people who maybe are more reluctant to acknowledge the fact that the market's changing, that it is, that we maybe need to think differently, that maybe we need to do things differently. In terms of sort of specific successes, I'd point out a handful of things. We ran sort of an extended proof of concept for an online platform for some of our terrorism products. It wasn't an outright success, but in terms of learning a lot of lessons and actually getting a product out and distributing it online, again, that was something that we wouldn't have envisaged being able to do a few years ago. We've been working with 90, and that's not a shameless plug. Like, one of the things we were able to do when we were sort of separated from underwriting and given a sort of specific innovation remit was acknowledge that the company is not that good at innovation and we had capability gaps, and go and say we need to fill those gaps. We work with 90 and we're beginning to totally reimagine some of the relationships we have with brokers and how we can interact with them. That's been a wild success, and I can say that based on the reaction of the brokers. They were fascinated by what we were doing and said it's the first time that they've ever had people engage them like that. We've done some great stuff with data internally, which has begun to move the dial in terms of underwriting and claims. And then we've got a few more things in the pipeline.
Is this a London market digital strategy? in the sense that you have to cope with lots of legacy issues as part of your digital strategy?
I would love to sit here and confess to us thinking about a purely digital business which does lots of really exciting, fantastic things in the manner that the people who normally sit on this stage talk about. It's not the case. We have a legacy business, and whilst it has a lot of problems and a lot of challenges, it's $1 billion business. It's generally a reasonably profitable business, and we can't just kind of push that to one side and build something new. We have to build on top of that. So it's a digital strategy in a London market sense.
Well, you're not alone in this room with that issue. But you're owned by AIG. Is that probably some AIG people here, but is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, do they give you lots of money or do they hold you back? I mean, how does it work?
I think it's a good thing, and I'm not just saying that on the off chance that someone's in the room. It lends a totally different perspective to what we're doing. We're a small Lloyd's syndicate. We focus very particularly on specialty lines, and suddenly becoming part of one of the world's largest insurance companies and taking the breadth of what they do, the market clout they have, the resources they have, that brings a lot of opportunity to us. It brings some complexity too, but I think if we can blend those two things well, small and agile, focused and specialist versus big and generalist, that's quite an interesting combination, I think.
So looking forward, how are you going to spend your money? What are the three big areas of investment for you?
Distribution is one. That's massive for us, and particularly looking at how distribution changes. We're trying to look at it independently and form our own view of the world. I think the future at Lloyd's is going to have a massive impact on that, and we're definitely going to take that into account. Underwriting, pricing, that's significant in terms of the products, how we price, how we construct our pricing models, how we make the underwriting process better. That's something that we think is critical to kind of sustaining the competitive advantage we do have. And then data and that's a very generic answer, but how it can support our underwriting, how it can support our claims. I think those would probably be the kind of the big three.
On the data, are you looking for people to help you sort your data out, or new data sources to enhance what you do?
I think it's elements of both. We sit on a significant amount of data, and we need help sorting it out. We've begun to do it in parts, and we've made some really progress, impressive progress that I'm proud of, but we need to go far further. There's more that we can unlock from that. New data sources that can enhance what we currently do is going to be incredibly valuable to us as well.
Jamie, thank you. A day in the life of a digital underwriting strategist. Thank you very much. Next, we've got Madeleine Durand from Bupa. Madeleine has stepped in at incredibly short notice because her boss has a broken vertebrae, which doesn't sound very nice. Presumably he's got very good private medical health insurance, and he's in a very good hospital being looked after. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we've not met, so do you want to introduce yourself rather than me make a mess of it?
Of course. Thank you, Robin. I have a background actually in strategy consulting, but I've always been passionate about healthcare. It's a very exciting moment to be in this space.
Now, I don't claim to be a world expert in health insurance, but I sense that these aren't golden times. What are the issues, and why is health insurance not growing?
There are two main reasons for that, really. The first is a quite hostile fiscal environment, and things could get even worse if IPT gets any nearer to 20%. And the second one is that customers are increasingly electing to self-pay for their treatment rather than having health insurance. And in fact, self-pay providers they're stating double-digit growth for the past couple of years, and they're very confident in their future growth.
Is that because the product's wrong and needs evolving? I mean, there's clearly demand for it, but not necessarily what there is available, and that may need some more flexibility over time?
I think it's mainly the fact that the products, if you're an individual and you need to pay for yourself, they're quite expensive. And so at some point, people make the decision to take the risk upon themselves and pay for the treatment, consider that the NHS are going to sufficiently cover them for a number of conditions, and then if anything more serious happens to them, then they will self-fund, and this will be a more economical solution for them.
I won't be alone here in knowing what you think of Vitality and whether they're eating your lunch or whether you don't worry about them at all.
They are the fastest growing competitor, both in terms of lives covered and in terms of profits, although they're starting from a much smaller base. However, they have a different area of focus and very different strengths than we have. So they're focusing mainly on the SME and consumer segments, and they rely heavily on advertising and on wellness and loyalty programs to attract a younger customer base. In general, when I've looked at the market, both in the UK, abroad, I find that new entrants have some big similarities. So they target underserved segments in the market, and they put forward capabilities that incumbents don't really have or that they're not very good at to differentiate themselves. And they all grow, but actually slower than what we'd expect for this to be called a big success. And I think personally that their biggest success must actually be shaping the way customers think about insurance and how they interact with the current providers they're using.
If you could wave a magic wand and leverage the combined talents of all these people, where would you point them? How could they help?
Well, there are a few things that would really help us going forward. One thing would be a low-cost admin platform that we would use to manage our corporate clients, and also a number of complementary products that we offer, such as travel or dental insurance. Another one would be a full-stack PMI solution, if that's not too much to ask.
Anyone got some questions for Madeleine while she's here?
Hi. You talk about PMIs like illness industry. What about the move to wellness, so you don't have to claim?
There will be an increasing shift towards prevention. However, there are very big uncertainties, I think, lying ahead about the data that is needed in order to build a truly preventative PMI product, and whether people will give us their consent to use this data, and that has a big potential to dramatically change the industry. But this is probably one of the biggest unknowns that lie ahead of us in our industry.
Madeleine, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you coming in at short notice.
Thank you very much, Robin. Thank you.
This is Jason Smith, everybody. He's the deputy lead of the data exchange at Experian. Tell me about your role and what it involves.
So there's the data exchange team itself, and essentially what we're about is working with potential partners, so external to Experian, and utilizing data that both we and the partner has to either improve products, create new products, and the way we typically go about doing that is through an innovation process.
Tell everybody what Experian's core expertise is, and then perhaps where you might be going from here.
Most people will relate to Experian in terms of a credit score. That's kind of what we're known for within the market, but we do have some really interesting pockets that are completely unrelated to that. So many people probably won't be aware that we do a lot within the marketing and targeting space. There's a big business around fraud and trying to help businesses prevent fraud. And then we provide an awful lot of checks around KYC, anti-money laundering, and so on.
So you've got this phenomenal data set which gives insights into people which must have some bearing on the insurance world. How are you coming into insurance, and what are you targeting?
Insurance has been a kind of neglected market within Experian. I think, primarily there have been banks and financial institutions driven. So I think we're slowly, and you could say, about time, recognizing that the insurance market is something we need to go into. The data that I think we have is incredibly valuable in terms of working with insurance partners to, as I say, either improve customer journey flows or indeed develop some new products.
And are you working with insurance companies, insurtechs? How are you working? What's your preferred way of engaging the model?
We are working with some insurers. So as a team, we are just completing some work with 90. We're doing some work with Lloyd's, and and also with some other insurers as well directly.
I'm seeing credit rating data as some form of proxy to be able to tell you something about your customer that is relevant to the underwriting process. Have we got that far? Do we know of the relationship of any kind yet?
It's not so much the credit risk data, but it's the alternative data that you can get, such as, for example, transactional data via open banking. That's an incredibly rich data set that can tell you all sorts of different things. So there may well be a correlation between an analysis of that data and in relation to an insurer.
So looking forward, what are the kind of companies you want to engage with, and what do you want to be doing, do you think, in the insurance world?
The simple answer is we just love to collaborate as a team. So our remit is specifically to go out and collaborate with external partners. So the ask and the pitch is really if there are any insurers or anyone out there who thinks, well, we've got some interesting data, we know Experian have got some interesting data, can we explore what could be done with that data sets? That's our ask. Now, in terms of some of the areas that we're looking at, but it doesn't have to be limited to this, we're looking at things like, as I say, improving that customer journey flow, so making that as frictionless as possible. Maybe that's pre-populating forms and so on. We're looking at whether we can do something with risk models. Maybe that's using the transaction data, for example, that you alluded to. New products, and also looking at maybe some underserved markets. So things like the gig economy, and that sort of freelance market that probably has been a little bit underserved.
Is there anything else other than that list that you would feel the innovation community could help with? And there's a second part to the question, which is, if anybody here wants to engage with you, how do they, and how do they go about contacting and engaging?
Well, they can reach out to me within the team, or indeed anyone else within the team. But I think, as I say, it's that thing about data, and I think it's come up twice already. People have data, they don't quite know what to do with it. We're a kind of specialist data innovation team, and invariably there's lots of things you can do. So that's the ask.
Anyone else got a question for Jason?
Do you think that what's going on with open banking could reinvent itself in insurance? Could we have open insurance?
Oh, there's no doubt. Open banking is a huge opportunity, not just within the insurance market, but generally. So I think the problem is that it's been very slow to get off the ground and hasn't really had that traction. And I think that's probably going to accelerate over the next 12 months. So again, what I would say to the insurance market is, go in with an open mind about what you could do with that level of data.
Brilliant. Jason Smith, from Experian, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Next up, we have the head of strategy at Brit. For those of you who don't know, this whole thing was founded by Paolo and I 4 years ago. Would I be right in saying that for Brit to have hired you and then James Birch as head of innovation, they are now taking very seriously the what next?
I'm joining as head of strategy. James has joined as head of innovation. I need to focus on the what next. The point is that, if you're a Talbot, if you're a Brit, you can't just hang around and follow the Lloyd's of London insurance market. You have got to work out actually really what the customers want. And, so at the heart of what we're trying to do, and this links totally to this reverse pitch, is saying, how can we differentiate ourselves? And, I remember back to the first reverse pitch that Intex ran 3 years ago, and it was sort of both interesting and entirely unactionable. And I look at where we are now, and I say, what do we want? We want help on bionic underwriting, we want help on claims, and we want help on risk management as a service rather than risk coverage as a product. And most people sitting here will say, well, that's no bloody use, Paolo. That's so generic, we can't do anything. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is because we are all still, as carriers, struggling actually to understand. We're good at what we do. We're good at underwriting annual risks that the brokers bring to us. And so we're really struggling to articulate what we want to do differently, which is why we look outwards. Parametric insurance is really interesting, because It's not just another way of underwriting what we do. It is a genuinely different product. And so what James Birch as our head of innovation, I'm sure what Jamie wants, what others want, is people who've got genuinely new ideas of how to cover risks that have previously not been easy to cover. You can give me as much data as you want to help me understand my current risks a bit better. And frankly, in a soft market, all I do is decline more risks as a result. What I really need now is people who can say, hey, there's this there's this risk that hasn't been covered before. I have a plan for how to help you cover it.
So the focus is on new product or better ways of doing existing product. If you've got something interesting along those lines, what's the model? I mean, how are you going to invest in these things? Are you going to do lots of POCs? How are you planning to make that work?
We at Brit are quite clear. We have no plans to invest in people. We want to find a small number of partners who will work in us. And you know what? We say no within 10 minutes if we're not interested. And we've had a few interesting meetings where James Birch, our head of innovation, who's a little bit more brutal than me, has said halfway through the meeting, look, we're not going to achieve anything here. Why don't we stop now? James is very practical. Look, this isn't going to turn into anything. Let's save everyone time. And frankly, I think a lot of the startups would have appreciated much more of that, frankly, from the carriers and the brokers over the last few years anyway. So we're like, interesting, not interesting, end of story.
Have you ever been on a dating app? I think the same dynamic applies. You know, if it's not going to work, just you save yourself an evening, Christ, and move on.
If we were all going to drag every single startup, and even someone like Experian, who's got infinitely more resources than a startup when it comes to playing the dating game around sales, if we're all going to drag them out, that's pointless for everyone. Let's be clear where we can tango and where we can't, and then proceed.
Very refreshing. Have you a very specific reverse pitch to make, or is it the one you've just made? In other words, bring me these.
Yeah, so products that are currently not effectively underwritten, come and tell us how you can do them. Parametrics are obviously interesting. Topics like the gig economy, which are not well covered in the market, are interesting. On the risk management side, this is a soft market. We are absolutely interested in ways that we can help clients avoid having to claim in the first place. And that's not a classic space that insurtechs operate in, but I know there's plenty of companies out there looking at risk mitigation. That's interesting. And on the claims side, the future at Lloyd's is making a big push on more efficient claims. And I look at one initiative we're doing, for example, on the SME side, which is working with a credit card company to directly pay claims onto the claimant's credit card. Ideas like that are just obviously beneficial for everyone. That's the type of thing we're interested in.
Bring them to you or James?
Bring to me or James. I'm around. James is in Las Vegas because he thinks that's cooler than here. But as a closing point on that, last year and the year before, we did not run this the same week as ITC because ITC was hot, ITC was buzzing. It's very clear now, I think, that the razzmatazz is less relevant. It's actually getting shit done that now matters.
Thank you, Paolo.
We covered a lot there, but don't forget you can get the key takeaways in our report at www.instec.london in the events section, or just follow the link in the episode notes. Now, we have an incredible lineup of events between now right up until March 2020. As well as our regular events, we've got a number of special members-only events coming up, including our wine tasting meet insurance event. So don't miss out on what we're up to and find out generally what we think of the breaking news each week in our newsletter. You can sign up from the website at www.instec.london, or again, follow the link in the episode notes. And finally, if you like what we're doing with these podcasts, please do give us a review and ranking. You can normally scroll down to the end of the episodes in whatever podcast platform you're using, and share it with others, or indeed just tell us directly what you think by emailing us at hello@instec.london.